Isabella Reyes had worked as a personal secretary for exactly 2 years, and in those 2 years, nobody had ever really noticed her. She wore thick glasses that were slightly too big for her face. She kept her long brown hair pulled back into a tight, plain bun every single day. Her clothes were simple and modest, usually oversized cardigans and long skirts that hid her figure completely. She was smart, organized, and always on time. But to most people in the office, she was invisible. Isabella worked for Damian Cross, one of the most powerful and feared men in the entire city. Everyone knew his name, and everyone knew what it really meant to work for him. On paper, Damian Cross owned a large chain of hotels and restaurants across the country. But underneath that polished business image, he controlled something much darker. He was the head of one of the most dangerous crime families in the region. People who crossed him disappeared. People who owed him money paid it back, one way or another. His name alone could silence a room full of grown men. Isabella had taken the secretary position because it paid extremely well, better than any other office job she could find with her degree. She needed the money badly. Her younger brother was in college, and she was the one paying his tuition after their parents passed away 3 years earlier. She told herself she would work there quietly, do her job perfectly, save enough money, and eventually move on to something safer. She never imagined Damian Cross would even remember her name, let alone notice her at all. Damian barely looked at Isabella most days. He would hand her stacks of documents without even glancing up from his phone. He would bark out instructions in short, sharp sentences while walking past her desk. To him, she was simply efficient, reliable, forgettable. He had other things on his mind, dangerous things, business deals worth millions of dollars, rival families circling his territory, and constant threats against his life. A quiet secretary in oversized glasses was the least interesting thing in his world. That all changed on a Tuesday afternoon, when Damian's assistant manager burst into his office with terrible news. An extremely important business partner from overseas, a man named Alexander Volkov, was arriving in the city that very evening for an urgent dinner meeting. This was not just any business partner. Volkov controlled shipping routes that Damian's entire operation depended on. If this meeting went badly, Damian could lose everything he had built over the past 10 years. There was one enormous problem. Volkov had specifically requested that Damian bring a date to the dinner. It was an old-fashioned tradition in Volkov's culture, a way of judging a man's character by the woman he chose to stand beside him. Damian's actual girlfriend, a woman named Vanessa, had broken up with him just 3 days earlier after a massive fight, and she had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him or his dangerous lifestyle anymore. Damian paced his office furiously, his mind racing. He could not tell Volkov the truth. He could not show up alone either, as that would insult Volkov deeply and possibly end their business relationship entirely. He needed a woman tonight, someone who could pretend to be his girlfriend for just a few hours, someone smart enough to handle Volkov's sharp questions and dangerous enough of a situation to keep quiet about everything she saw and heard. His eyes landed on Isabella, sitting quietly at her desk outside his office, typing away at her computer as usual. Damian almost laughed out loud at the ridiculous thought that crossed his mind. His plain, quiet secretary, dressed like she worked in a library, pretending to be his girlfriend in front of one of the most dangerous men in international shipping? It seemed impossible. But he was out of options, and time was running out fast. He walked out of his office and stopped directly in front of her desk. Isabella looked up, startled, pushing her glasses further up her nose nervously. "Yes, Mr. Cross? Do you need something?" she asked, her voice calm but slightly shaky, as it always was when he spoke to her directly. "I need you to come to dinner with me tonight," Damian said bluntly. "As my date. It is business. Nothing more. Wear something decent. We leave in 3 hours." Isabella blinked at him in complete shock. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him entirely. "I am sorry, sir. Did you say dinner? As your date?" "That is exactly what I said," Damian replied, already turning to walk back toward his office. "It is important. Extremely important. Do not embarrass me." Isabella sat frozen at her desk long after he disappeared behind his office door. Her heart pounded in her chest, a strange mixture of fear and disbelief washing over her. She had heard stories whispered around the office about Damian Cross's true business, the darker side hidden behind the hotels and restaurants. She had always kept her head down, minded her own business, and avoided any situation that could put her in danger. Now, suddenly, she was being pulled directly into his dangerous world for a single evening, with absolutely no explanation of what to expect. But underneath her fear, something else stirred inside Isabella, something Damien Cross had no idea existed. Isabella was not who she appeared to be. Her plain glasses, her oversized clothes, her quiet, mousy behavior at the office, all of it was carefully constructed, a disguise she had built for herself years ago after a terrifying incident in her past that had taught her the danger of standing out. Very few people alive knew the real Isabella Reyes, the woman hidden underneath the careful disguise. Damien expected an awkward, embarrassing evening ahead, forced to introduce his boring, forgettable secretary as his girlfriend to a dangerous foreign business partner. He had absolutely no idea what he was truly about to unleash. 3 hours later, when Isabella stepped out of the car in front of the extravagant restaurant Volkov had chosen, Damien Cross would receive the shock of his entire life, a shock that would change everything he thought he knew about the quiet woman who had been sitting right outside his office for the past 2 years. Damien Cross stood outside the restaurant entrance, checking his watch every few seconds. The valet had already parked his car once, but he sent his driver to pick up Isabella from her apartment instead. He did not trust her to arrive on time, and honestly, he did not think much about her at all beyond the simple task he had given her. Wear something decent. Show up. Say very little. That was all he expected. The restaurant Volkov had chosen was one of the most expensive in the entire city, a place with candlelight, live piano music, and a view overlooking the harbor. Damien had eaten here many times for important business meetings. Tonight, everything needed to go perfectly. His entire shipping operation depended on Volkov leaving this dinner impressed and satisfied. A sleek black car pulled up to the entrance right on time. Damien glanced at it briefly, then looked away, checking his phone for messages from his security team. The driver stepped out and walked around to open the passenger door. Damien barely paid attention until he heard a small gasp from the valet standing beside him. He looked up, and his entire body went completely still. A woman stepped out of the car, and for a moment, Damien genuinely believed the driver had brought the wrong person entirely. This woman wore a fitted, deep red dress that moved elegantly with every step she took. Her long brown hair, usually pulled back into that tight, plain bun, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her glasses were gone completely, replaced by nothing but her own striking, confident eyes, lined perfectly with a subtle, expert hand. She wore heels that added several inches to her height, and she walked in them with the effortless grace of someone who had done this many times before. It took Damien several seconds to realize this stunning woman was actually Isabella. "Isabella," he said, his voice coming out far less controlled than he intended. She smiled at him calmly, completely unbothered by his obvious shock. "Good evening, Mr. Cross. You said to wear something decent." Damien could not find words immediately. He was a man known throughout the city for his cold composure, his ability to remain calm and controlled in the most dangerous, high-pressure situations imaginable. Yet here he was, standing outside a restaurant, completely speechless because his quiet, forgettable secretary had transformed into someone he barely recognized. "You look—" He started, then stopped himself, unsure exactly how to finish that sentence without sounding foolish. "Different," Isabella offered, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I get that a lot." Before Damien could respond, the restaurant host approached them, informing them that Mr. Volkov had already arrived and was waiting at his private table. Damien quickly composed himself, offering his arm to Isabella out of habit more than anything else. She took it smoothly, and together they walked into the restaurant. Every head in the room turned as they passed. Damien noticed it immediately, the way other diners glanced up from their meals, the way waiters paused briefly to look twice. He was used to attention when he walked into a room, but tonight, he realized with an odd feeling in his chest, the attention was not entirely about him. They reached the private table near the back of the restaurant, where Alexander Volkov sat waiting with 2 of his own bodyguards standing quietly nearby. Volkov was an older man, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He stood as they approached, his gaze immediately shifting to Isabella with obvious interest. "Damien," Volkov said warmly, extending his hand. "And who is this lovely woman you have brought with you tonight?" "This is Isabella," Damien said, still slightly thrown off balance. "My girlfriend." Volkov's sharp eyes studied Isabella carefully as she extended her hand and greeted him with a warm, confident smile. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Volkov. Damien speaks very highly of your business partnership." Damien blinked in surprise. He had never once mentioned Volkov's name to Isabella. She had clearly done her research somehow, in the short 3 hours she had between his sudden request and this dinner. Volkov seemed pleased by her polished, confident greeting, gesturing for everyone to sit down at the table. As dinner began, Damien expected Isabella to sit quietly beside him, nodding along politely while he handled the actual business conversation. Instead, something completely unexpected happened. When Volkov mentioned a recent shipping delay involving international trade regulations, Isabella spoke up smoothly, asking an intelligent, detailed question about specific port authority policies. Volkov's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "You know about maritime shipping regulations?" Volkov asked, clearly impressed. "I studied international business in university," Isabella replied casually, taking a sip of her wine. "Shipping logistics was actually one of my favorite subjects." Damien sat quietly beside her, watching this conversation unfold with growing disbelief. In 2 years, Isabella had never once mentioned anything about her education or background beyond the basic information on her resume. He had assumed, without ever really thinking about it, that she was simply an ordinary secretary with ordinary skills. Now, she was discussing complex international shipping law with one of the most important men in his entire business network, and doing it with more confidence and knowledge than half of his own executives possessed. The dinner continued for nearly 2 hours, and with every passing minute, Damien found himself watching Isabella with growing fascination. She handled Volkov's sharp, testing questions with ease. She laughed at his jokes at exactly the right moments. She even managed to smoothly redirect the conversation once when Volkov asked a slightly too personal question about Damien's business finances, protecting him without him even having to ask. By the time dessert arrived, Volkov leaned back in his chair, looking thoroughly satisfied. "Damien," he said, glancing between the two of them with a warm smile, "I must say I am impressed. This woman is not just beautiful. She is sharp. Intelligent. A rare combination indeed. You are a lucky man." Damien forced a small smile, still trying to process everything happening around him. "Yes," he said slowly, glancing sideways at Isabella. "I am beginning to realize that." As the dinner finally came to an end and Volkov's car pulled away into the night, Damien turned to Isabella, standing beside her outside the restaurant under the soft glow of the streetlights. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, curiosity mixed with something else entirely, something he could not quite name. "Who exactly are you, Isabella Reyes?" he asked quietly. "Because the woman who worked for me for the past 2 years is clearly not the same woman standing in front of me right now." Isabella met his gaze steadily, her confident smile fading slightly into something more serious. "That," she said softly, "is a very long story, Mr. Cross. One I am not sure you are ready to hear." Damien Cross was not a man who accepted vague answers easily. In his world, uncertainty got people killed. He needed information, always, about everyone around him, especially anyone who suddenly proved to be far more capable and mysterious than he had originally believed. Standing outside the restaurant, staring at Isabella in her stunning red dress, he felt an unfamiliar and uncomfortable feeling creeping into his chest. He did not like not knowing things. And right now, he realized he knew almost nothing real about the woman who had worked just a few feet from his office door for 2 entire years. "I think," Damien said slowly, "you owe me that long story. Tonight." Isabella studied him carefully under the soft streetlight, weighing her options. She had spent years building walls around her past, protecting a version of herself that stayed small, quiet, and unnoticed. Tonight had cracked that wall wide open, and there was no simple way to close it back up again. "Not here," she finally said. "Somewhere private." Damien nodded and gestured toward his car. The ride back to his penthouse was silent, tense with unspoken questions. Isabella stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, while Damien glanced at her occasionally, still trying to reconcile the confident woman beside him with the quiet secretary he thought he knew. Once inside his penthouse, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, Damien poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Isabella. She took it without hesitation, settling onto the leather couch with a composure that told him she was far more comfortable in luxurious surroundings than her modest secretary salary should have allowed. "Start from the beginning," Damien said, sitting across from her, his sharp eyes studying every small movement she made. Isabella took a slow breath before speaking. "My father was a man named Anton Reyes. Perhaps that name means nothing to you now, but 10 years ago, it meant everything in certain circles." Damien's expression shifted slightly. The name did sound familiar, though he could not immediately place it. "Continue," he said. "My father ran one of the largest private security and intelligence firms on the East Coast," Isabella explained. "Not the kind you find in a phone book. The kind that governments and powerful families hired quietly, for things they could not trust to regular police or ordinary bodyguards. He trained me himself, starting when I was 12 years old. Languages, negotiation tactics, financial systems, self-defense, surveillance detection. He believed knowledge was the only real protection in a dangerous world." Damien listened closely, his glass of whiskey forgotten in his hand. This was not the story he expected. "Everything changed when I was 19, Isabella continued, her voice growing quieter, more careful. "My father uncovered information about a corrupt deal between a powerful family and several local officials. He was going to expose it. Before he could, our house was attacked one night. My father was killed. I barely escaped, hiding in a place he had shown me years earlier, exactly for a moment like that." Damien's jaw tightened. He had heard countless stories of violence in his line of work, but something about the raw honesty in Isabella's voice struck him differently. "I am sorry," he said quietly, and he meant it, a rare admission from a man who rarely apologized for anything. "After that night," Isabella went on, "I disappeared completely. I changed my name legally. I cut my hair, wore glasses I did not need, dressed in clothes designed to make me forgettable. I built an entirely new identity, quiet and unremarkable, because standing out had gotten my father killed, and I refused to let it happen to me too. I finished my education under my new name, took ordinary jobs, and made absolutely certain nobody ever looked twice at me again." "Until tonight," Damien said. Isabella nodded slowly. "Until tonight. You needed someone convincing for an important dinner, and some old instinct in me simply took over. I have not worn that dress, or done my hair like that, in almost 6 years." Damien sat back, processing everything she had just told him. Pieces of information began falling into place in his mind, an unusual confidence in her writing and organization, the way she had once calmly handled an aggressive supplier over the phone months earlier, small moments he had noticed but never truly considered before. She had been hiding an entire lifetime of skill and experience directly under his nose. "Why did you take a job working for me specifically?" Damien asked, his voice edged with sudden suspicion. In his line of work, coincidences rarely existed. "Honestly," Isabella said, "I needed money that paid well without asking too many questions about my background, and your company posted an opening that fit perfectly. I did not choose you because of who you really are, Mr. Cross. I did not even know the truth about your business until I had already worked there for several months." Damien studied her closely, searching for any sign of deception in her expression. He found none. Years of dealing with dangerous, dishonest people had sharpened his instincts considerably, and everything about Isabella's careful, measured honesty felt genuine. "You handled Volkov tonight better than most of my own men could have," Damien admitted. "That level of skill does not come from a normal secretarial job." "My father trained me well," Isabella said simply. "Old habits do not disappear completely, no matter how hard you try to bury them." A long silence settled between them, filled with new understanding and unspoken questions still lingering in the air. Damien finally spoke again, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful than the sharp, commanding tone he normally used. "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." Isabella met his gaze steadily. "Go ahead." "Now that I know who you really are," Damien said carefully, "and what you are truly capable of, would you consider a different position within my organization? Something that actually uses your real skills, rather than filing paperwork and answering phones." Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of her father's cautious training visible in her expression. "That depends entirely on what kind of position you are talking about, Mr. Cross." Damien leaned forward, his expression serious. The kind that could put you directly in the middle of my world, the dangerous parts you have clearly been avoiding for years. I will not lie to you about the risks involved." Isabella sat quietly for a long moment, staring into her glass of whiskey, weighing a decision that could completely change the careful, hidden life she had built for herself. Finally, she looked up, meeting Damien's intense gaze directly. "Before I answer that," she said slowly, "I need to know something first. Why exactly do you need someone with my particular skills right now? What kind of trouble are you actually in, Mr. Cross?" Damien's expression grew serious, almost grim, as he set his glass down on the table beside him. "That," he said quietly, "is a very long story of my own." Damien Cross stood up and walked toward the massive window overlooking the city lights, his hands sliding into his pockets as he stared out at the skyline in silence. Isabella watched him carefully, sensing the weight of whatever he was about to reveal. In 2 years of working for him, she had never seen him look this uncertain, this burdened. "3 months ago," Damien finally began, "someone tried to kill me. A car bomb, outside my downtown office. I survived only because my driver noticed something wrong with the vehicle at the last second and pulled me away just in time. 2 of my guards were not so lucky." Isabella's expression remained calm, though her mind immediately began working through the information, old instincts sharpening despite her attempt to stay detached. "Do you know who was responsible?" "I have suspicions," Damien said. "A rival family, the Kovalenkos, has been trying to take over my shipping routes for over a year now. But suspicion is not proof, and in my world, acting on the wrong assumption can start a war that kills far more people than necessary." "And Volkov?" Isabella asked. "How does he fit into this?" Damien turned back to face her. "Volkov controls the shipping lanes I depend on. If the Kovalenkos manage to convince him to switch his loyalty to them instead of me, I lose everything. My entire operation collapses within months. Tonight's dinner was not just business as usual. It was survival." Isabella nodded slowly, understanding now why he had been so desperate earlier that day. "And you believe someone close to you might be feeding information to the Kovalenkos. That is why you needed someone you could trust completely and suddenly, for tonight." Damien's eyes sharpened with surprise. "How did you know that?" "Because that is exactly the situation my father faced before he died," Isabella said quietly. "Someone on the inside, feeding information to dangerous people. It is always someone close. Someone trusted." Damien sat back down across from her, running a hand through his hair, an unusually tired gesture for a man who always appeared perfectly composed. "I have a mole somewhere in my organization. I am almost certain of it. Sensitive information keeps reaching the Kovalenkos, information only a handful of people should know. I have not been able to identify who it is, and every day that passes puts me at greater risk." Isabella considered this carefully, her father's old training rising naturally within her. "How many people have access to this sensitive information?" 6 people, Damien said. "My head of security, my financial advisor, my second-in-command, 2 senior guards, and—" He paused. "And who else?" Isabella pressed. "You," Damien admitted quietly. "As my secretary, you have seen more of my private schedule and communications than almost anyone else in my organization." Isabella held his gaze steadily, not flinching from the implication. "If you suspected me even slightly, you would not be telling me any of this right now." "No," Damien agreed. "I would not. Which is exactly why I need someone like you. Someone with real training, real skill, someone completely outside the normal circle of suspicion because nobody, including myself until tonight, ever saw you as a real threat or a real asset." The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. Isabella understood exactly what he was asking of her, though he had not said it directly yet. He wanted her to use the skills she had spent years hiding to help him find the traitor within his own organization, skills that could put her directly back into the dangerous world she had worked so hard to escape. "If I agree to help you," Isabella said carefully, "I need protection guaranteed for myself and my brother. He knows nothing about any of this, and he must remain completely uninvolved and safe." "You have my word," Damien said immediately. "Nobody touches your brother. I will personally guarantee his safety." Isabella studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any hint of dishonesty. She had learned from her father years ago how to read people, how to detect the subtle signs of deception hidden beneath confident words. She found nothing but sincerity in Damien's tired, serious expression. "There is something else you should know," Damien added quietly. "The Kovalenkos are not the only ones who might have noticed tonight's transformation. Volkov has connections everywhere. If anyone loyal to the Kovalenkos was watching that restaurant tonight, they now know that Isabella Reyes is not who she appeared to be. That alone could put you in serious danger, whether you agree to help me or not." A cold realization settled over Isabella. She had spent years carefully avoiding exactly this kind of exposure, and in a single evening, stepping out of a car in a red dress, she may have already undone all of it. There was no going back now to her quiet, invisible life. The choice had essentially already been made for her the moment she walked into that restaurant. "Then I suppose," Isabella said slowly, setting her glass down with steady hands, "I no longer have the luxury of staying hidden." Damien watched her carefully, noticing the subtle shift in her posture, the way her shoulders straightened slightly, the sharp focus returning to her eyes. This was not the quiet secretary who typed his emails and organized his schedule. This was someone else entirely, someone shaped by tragedy and trained for exactly this kind of danger. "Does this mean you will help me?" Damien asked. Isabella met his gaze directly, something resolute settling into her expression. "It means I do not have much choice left. But yes, Mr. Cross. I will help you find whoever is betraying you, before they succeed in finishing what they started 3 months ago." Damien felt something shift between them in that moment, a fragile trust beginning to form between two people who had both spent years hiding dangerous truths beneath carefully constructed masks. But even as relief washed over him, a new worry crept into his mind. If the Kovalenkos truly had noticed Isabella tonight, their next move might come faster and more violently than either of them anticipated. Neither of them could have known, as they sat together in that quiet penthouse discussing danger and betrayal, that outside in the dark city streets below, someone was already watching the building, someone who had indeed noticed the mysterious transformation of Damien Cross's secretary, and who was already reporting this unexpected development directly back to the Kovalenko family. Across the street from Damien Cross's penthouse building, a man sat quietly in a parked car, a small pair of binoculars resting on the dashboard beside him. His name was Yuri, and he had been assigned 3 months earlier to watch Damien Cross's movements closely, reporting everything unusual back to his employers, the Kovalenko family. Most nights were boring, filled with nothing more than watching lights turn on and off in various apartments. Tonight had been anything but boring. Yuri had followed Damien's car to the restaurant earlier that evening, expecting the usual routine, a business dinner, perhaps a few new faces, nothing particularly noteworthy. Instead, he had watched in surprise as a stunning woman in a red dress stepped out of Damien's car, a woman he immediately recognized, after a closer look through his binoculars, as the same quiet, plain secretary who worked in Damien's office every single day. This was new information, important information. Yuri quickly snapped several photographs with his phone before Damien and Isabella disappeared inside the restaurant. He continued watching throughout the evening, noting how comfortable and confident this transformed secretary appeared beside Damien's important business partner. When the dinner finally ended and Damien's car drove straight to his penthouse instead of dropping the secretary off at her own home, Yuri knew he needed to report this immediately. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "This is Yuri," he said quietly when the call connected. "I have something important. Damien Cross's secretary, the quiet one nobody ever paid attention to, she is not who we thought she was. Tonight she looked completely different, confident, well-dressed, clearly comfortable in dangerous situations. She handled herself extremely well with Volkov at dinner." On the other end of the line, a cold, calculating voice belonging to Mikhail Kovalenko, the current head of the rival crime family, listened carefully. "Send me everything you have. Photographs, details, everything." "Already sending them now," Yuri replied, attaching the photos to a message on his phone. "There is something else. I ran a quick search on her legal name after seeing her tonight. Isabella Reyes. That name did not match anything significant in our usual databases, but something about her seemed familiar, so I dug a little deeper into old records." "And?" Mikhail asked impatiently. "I believe her real background might connect to Anton Reyes," Yuri said carefully. The private security expert who was killed almost 10 years ago after threatening to expose corruption involving several powerful families. I remember hearing stories about that case when I was younger. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mikhail's mind worked quickly, connecting dangerous pieces of information together. If this secretary truly was Anton Reyes's daughter, trained by one of the most respected security experts in the business, her sudden appearance beside Damien Cross changed everything about their current plans. This complicates things significantly, Mikhail finally said. If she has even half of her father's training, she could become a serious problem for our operation. Damien has clearly brought her closer to him for a reason. Perhaps he suspects a leak within his organization and believes she can help him find it. What would you like me to do? Yuri asked. Mikhail considered his options carefully. Killing Isabella immediately would be simple, but it would also alert Damien instantly that they knew more than they should, potentially destroying months of careful planning and their valuable inside source within his organization. A more patient, calculated approach would serve them better. For now, continue watching, Mikhail instructed. Learn everything you can about her movements, her schedule, anyone she speaks with. If she truly is Anton Reyes's daughter, she may already know things that could expose our entire operation. We need to understand exactly how dangerous she really is before we decide how to handle this situation. After ending the call, Mikhail sat quietly in his own office across the city, staring thoughtfully at the photographs Yuri had sent him. The image of Isabella in her red dress, confident and striking, told a very different story than the plain, forgettable secretary their inside source had described to them for months. Someone within Damien's organization had clearly underestimated this woman. Completely, and Mikhail intended to find out exactly who else might have missed something this significant. Meanwhile, back inside Damien's penthouse, Isabella and Damien had continued discussing their plan late into the night. They agreed she would begin quietly reviewing recent business transactions and communications, searching for any patterns or inconsistencies that might reveal the identity of the mole within his organization. She would maintain her secretary position publicly, keeping her true skills hidden from everyone except Damien himself, allowing her to investigate without raising suspicion among his staff. "You should be careful walking home tonight," Damien said as their conversation finally wound down near midnight. "I will have my driver take you." "That is not necessary," Isabella replied, standing and smoothing down her red dress. "I am more capable of protecting myself than you might realize, Mr. Cross." "I am beginning to understand that," Damien admitted, a small, genuine smile appearing on his face for the first time that entire evening. "Still, humor me. After tonight, I would rather not take unnecessary risks with the one person who might actually help me survive whatever is coming." Isabella considered arguing further, but something in his tired, sincere expression made her relent. "Fine. But starting tomorrow, we operate exactly as I say. If I am going to find whoever is betraying you, I need complete access and complete trust, without interference." "Agreed," Damien said without hesitation. As Damien's driver took Isabella home through the quiet city streets that night, neither of them noticed Yuri's car following carefully at a distance, keeping track of exactly where she lived, information that would soon become extremely valuable to the Kovalenko family's growing plans. Isabella entered her modest apartment a while later, locking the door securely behind her out of old habit. She removed her heels, sat down on her small couch, and finally allowed herself a moment to process everything that had happened in a single evening. Just 24 hours earlier, her life had been quiet, controlled, and carefully hidden. Now, she found herself pulled directly back into the dangerous world she had spent nearly a decade running from. She had no way of knowing yet just how closely she was already being watched, or how quickly the Kovalenko family was about to make their next dangerous move against both her and Damien Crosspoint. 2 weeks passed, and Isabella settled into her new double life with practiced ease. During the day, she remained the same quiet, unremarkable secretary everyone in the office had always known, typing reports and answering phones exactly as before. But in the early mornings and late evenings, she worked closely with Damien, quietly reviewing years of financial records, shipment schedules, and internal communications, searching patiently for the small inconsistencies that would reveal their traitor. Her father's training proved invaluable. Where Damien's security team had searched for obvious signs of betrayal, large financial transfers, or suspicious phone calls, Isabella looked for smaller, more subtle patterns. She noticed that certain shipment delays always seemed to happen right after specific internal meetings. She noticed that the Kovalenkos always appeared to know about competitive bids just hours before Damien's own team finalized their decisions. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge, one that pointed towards someone very close to Damien, someone who attended nearly every important meeting and had access to almost every sensitive decision made within the organization. "It is Marcus," Isabella finally told Damien one evening, sliding a folder of carefully organized evidence across his desk. "Your second in command." Damien stared at the folder in stunned silence. Marcus Bellamy had worked for him for almost 8 years, since the very beginning of Damien's rise to power. He trusted Marcus with nearly everything, considered him almost like family. "Are you certain?" Damien asked quietly, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Look at the pattern," Isabella said, pointing to specific dates highlighted in the documents. "Every single leak happened within hours of a meeting Marcus attended alone with you. The timing is too consistent to be coincidence. I also found an encrypted file on the shared company server, hidden inside old expense reports, containing detailed notes about your security schedule and daily movements. The file was created using Marcus's personal login credentials." Damien's jaw tightened as the painful truth settled over him. The man he had trusted for 8 years, the man who stood beside him through countless dangerous situations, had been quietly selling him out to his most dangerous enemies. "Why?" Damien asked, more to himself than to Isabella. "He has never wanted for anything working for me." "Money is not always the reason," Isabella said gently. "Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes the Kovalenkos threatened someone he loves. We may never know his exact reasons unless you ask him directly." Damien sat in heavy silence for a long moment, processing the betrayal. Finally, he looked up at Isabella with a hardened, determined expression. "We need to confirm this completely before I act. If we move against Marcus and we are wrong, it will destroy trust within my entire organization." Isabella nodded, already having anticipated this concern. "I have a plan. We feed Marcus a small piece of false information, something specific enough that only he would know it, then watch to see if it reaches the Kovalenkos. If it does, we will have our confirmation beyond any doubt." The plan worked exactly as Isabella predicted. 3 days later, false information about a supposedly upcoming shipment route change, information only shared directly with Marcus, appeared in an intercepted communication between Yuri and Mikhail Kovalenko, obtained through a contact Isabella still maintained from her father's old network. The betrayal was confirmed completely. That night, Damien called Marcus into his office, along with Isabella and 2 of his most trusted guards. Marcus arrived confidently, completely unaware that his years of secret betrayal had finally been discovered. The moment he saw Isabella standing calmly beside Damien's desk, dressed simply as always but with a new sharpness in her eyes, a flicker of genuine fear crossed his face. "You know," Marcus said quietly, understanding immediately why he had been summoned. "Why?" Damien asked, his voice dangerously calm, the same calm that had built his entire criminal empire through years of controlled, calculated decisions. Marcus's confident exterior finally crumbled. "They threatened my sister," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. 2 years ago. They said if I did not cooperate, they would kill her. I had no choice, Damien. I tried to protect the information as much as I could without endangering her." Damien studied his former second-in-command carefully, years of loyalty and betrayal tangled together in a complicated web of guilt and fear. In his world, betrayal typically meant death, a harsh lesson necessary to maintain order and control among his men. But something about Marcus's genuine fear for his sister's safety, combined with Isabella's earlier gentle words about fear rather than greed driving betrayal, gave Damien pause. "Your sister is safe now," Damien finally said. "I will personally ensure her protection, permanently, from this moment forward. But you can never work for me again, Marcus. Your betrayal put everyone in this organization at risk, no matter your reasons. You will leave the city tonight, and you will never contact anyone from my organization again. If I ever hear that you have spoken to the Kovalenkos, or anyone else, about my business again, I will not be so merciful next time." Marcus nodded quickly, relief and gratitude flooding his exhausted expression. "Thank you, Damien. I am truly sorry." After Marcus left the office that night, disappearing from the city exactly as instructed, Damien turned to Isabella, who had watched the entire confrontation with quiet, careful attention. "You could have simply told me to kill him," Damien said. "Most people in my position would have expected exactly that." "I am not most people," Isabella replied simply. "And you are clearly not the ruthless monster the entire city believes you to be, Mr. Cross. Not completely, anyway." Damien allowed himself a small, genuine smile, something that had become slightly less rare during the past 2 weeks working closely alongside Isabella. With the leak finally closed, the Kovalenkos have lost their advantage. Volkov will remain loyal to our shipping agreement, and my organization is safe again, at least for now. "For now," Isabella agreed. "Though I suspect the Kovalenkos will not simply give up so easily." "Probably not," Damien admitted. "Which means I will likely need your particular skills again in the future, Isabella Reyes." Isabella considered this for a long moment, thinking about the quiet, hidden life she had carefully built over the past decade, a life that had changed completely and permanently the moment she stepped out of that car in a bright red dress. Strangely, she found she did not miss her old invisible existence nearly as much as she thought she would. "I suppose," she said finally, a small smile crossing her own face, "someone does need to keep you and your organization out of trouble, Mr. Cross." And as the danger from the Kovalenko family settled temporarily into an uneasy silence, a new, unexpected partnership had quietly formed between the powerful Mafia Boss and his secretary, one built on mutual respect, hidden talents, and the surprising discovery that sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting simply for the right moment to reveal exactly who they truly are.